Hi, welcome to The Conversation. You're listening to Andy Mason, and this is authentic conversations around the messy intersection of faith, family, and business. And it's brought to you by heaveninbusiness.com, guiding you in your partnership with God at work and engaging in the well-being of the city you serve. Hey, this episode is an interview I did with Nicola Murphy of Knowbe, GNOWBE.com, is an online learning platform. And we had a conversation around well-being and managing well-being, becoming a thriving individual regardless of what you face, how to understand, recognize burnout or the signs that are leading towards that and what to do about it. And so it came about because I've met and walked with Nicola and what she's doing in the environment. I've used Knowbe in the past, and I had some friends around me that were kind of having breakdowns. Emotional, spiritual, some physical. And I just thought, this is not okay. This is not acceptable. It's not cool. We shouldn't be doing this, but how do we go about recognizing that and doing something about it? So I trust that you will enjoy this. Please don't hesitate to share this. Please post a review. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me, Andy at heaveninbusiness.com. Have a great week.
And you're probably asking, why are we talking about the subject of burnout? And I just know for me, in conversations with many clients within our Knowbe community, if you're talking to professionals, L&D workers, instructional designers, content creators, we tend to be high achievers. We tend to care about people a lot, so we exert a lot of ourselves, a lot of our time, 3 a.m. in the morning, usually. I've heard so many stories like that. And burnout is just such a norm in our culture, and it's not sustainable. So really that's why we brought Andy Mason in to kind of talk us through kind of what he thinks it looks like, why is it a hot topic, how can we actually avoid burnout and recognize the symptoms of it before we kind of crash and hit that wall. And I have a couple of questions actually from some of my clients that they really love some answers to. So I know you've got some brilliant stories. Andy also has a blog and I think podcasts probably on the topic as well, which is fantastic. So why do you think why is burnout such a hot topic right now?
I think people have possibly done it. I think it's really interesting, particularly as we become more and more or less and less of a tactile industry. There's more and more people working in less and less with kinetically. It's more and more online. It's more and more in the office. So the whole human nature, the fight, the flight, what do I do when I get triggered in that regard? Normally you'd run or fight, which is an adrenaline rush and release. And for us, if we're working at a laptop, sitting in a desk, sitting stationary, driving trucks, whatever that may be, without that healthy outlet, it builds up and builds up and builds up. And that's just the physical component. Yeah. Then there's emotional component of walking through a global pandemic, which just adds pressure to everything. Well, that's the thing.
I was thinking COVID, just coming out of that era. I mean, we were all living on our laptops, back-to-back Zoom calls. You know, when you're in a 9 to 5 work day, you usually have breaks in between the meetings and things that you do. But suddenly when you're online, it was suddenly okay to have back-to-back. You know, I don't know about you, but I had 7 to 8 Zoom calls right after each other. And obviously it's going to lead to burnout. But then we've kind of brought that back into the office a little bit, that kind of mentality, which I think definitely does contribute. And I think I'd be interested to see what kinds of patterns and trends are you seeing in relation to burnout. So you work with a lot of clients, a lot of businesses. Oh my gosh, you were telling me a brilliant story the other day about a success story that you had with a company. I think it was a manufacturing company that you helped them with. What are the trends and patterns that you're seeing when you work with clients or work them through how to avoid burnout and actually be sustainable? Yeah,
and there's so many aspects of this, and there's a bunch of authors that are professionally. So just to qualify, I'm not professionally trained in psychology in that side. I have friends I'm not, and I haven't written on that topic. I'm more from a practitioner walking with people to how to stay healthy and whole and have holistic or whole life success in your business. So financially, physically, relationally, emotionally, and spiritually. So that's what I walk with people to do. So I think you're referring to a client that we took on about a year ago, and it's in the staffing company. They changed their model, pivoted, and at the time they had so many things going on. Like I would just say, I just call it a miracle that they're alive in their business. They had, they were generating about $25,000 a week in their business. Now this is a staffing company, so they're paying most of that out. So that's not enough to survive on. They were growing rapidly or trying to grow, but their background in a past bankruptcy of a business, they had a staff situation where one of the people they'd placed was under investigation for murder.
Oh, wow.
So there's a little bit of stress involved in that.
Just a little bit,
In the middle of that, their landlord says you've got to get out of your house. Their finance company, their credit score, they can't get credit because of the history of their on their credit score. So they're trying to grow, but they're trying to scramble to get credit.
Gosh.
And in the middle of this, it's like, I remember he'd get anxiety. He'd wake up like, just there's so many things I cannot control.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And I think that's a big thing. It's so much more beyond my ability to control. And when we try to control our world and make it safe for ourselves, what we're actually doing is we're making it worse. So bringing it down to, it's like Stephen Covey's circle of influence, circle of concern. I'm concerned about all of these things. Draw 2 circles on your page, one big circle and then a second circle inside that circle. The bigger circle is the circle of concern. Those are all the things that will wake me up at night. I'll be concerned about. I'm concerned about what's happening with the values of the nation. I'm concerned what's happening with my friend's friend who's got cancer. All these things that I'm concerned
Finances.
about. The smaller circle is my circle of influence. Those are the things, or you could say circle of control. That's what I have direct influence over. And that's much smaller than what I'm concerned about. When I focus on the circle of concern, it leads to anxiety because I actually don't have influence over that.
Wow.
But when I focus on that which I already have influence over, another way is what is already in your hand. Focus on what you can do something about. And so with this particular company, we just, every 2 weeks we'd meet. And we would firstly talk them off the ledge and just encourage them, because there is nothing done that's of any significance that's easy.
That's very true. Say that again.
There is nothing done that is of any significance that is easy.
Yeah, it's true.
There is everything we do. It's like meaning comes from doing hard things. So it's not about hitting the easy button. And so we encouraged him, was the first thing. You're not alone. Then number 2, we break down, what have you got? What do you got on your what do you got to do? And we break it down, okay, what could you do? What could you do? What could you do? So this is a real practical, if you're in the middle of this is a quick win for you. Whatever you're facing, do the 2 circles. What do you have influence over? And then what could you do? And then keep asking yourself, what else could I do? What else could I do? What else could I do? And then we literally would make a list of things, and he'd just go and do what he can do.
But it wasn't everything. It was just kind of the first thing, right? When you're saying what could you do, just what's within your control, right in front of you. That first step, and once that's ticked off, the next.
I need money. I need money to sustain this business.
Gotcha.
Okay, so what could you do? Well, I could talk to this person. Okay, what else could you do?
Nice.
Well, I could talk to this other person. Great. What else could you do? Well, I could talk to another financial institution. Great.
So helpful, because usually when you're getting to that point of I'm overwhelmed, I'm burned out, everything's just going haywire around me, you can't figure out what the next step is. You just get blocked. Right?
And the reason for that is because the fight flight. So it's anxiety. It's hormones and chemicals released and adrenaline released, so that your body is positioned to be able to run or fight, not think. So, and that's where, and so here's a quick win. Do the 2 circles and then make a list of the things that you could do.
That's such a good practical.
Here's another real quick win. If you're in that situation, and go for a walk. go for a walk. There's science that's coming out of, like I'm sitting here with Nicola at her dining table, and I'm looking out the window, and I can see a tree with leaves, and the leaves are moving in the breeze. So leaves moving in the breeze, water that moves, and you see the waves, and then thirdly, the flame, so a fire or a candle. So in ancient practices where they'd have those things, either walking in nature or having a candle. Wow. So you'd see in a lot of religious services where they have a candle, in meditation, it's actually scientifically proven now that actually it calms the brain.
What?
So go for a walk.
Yeah.
And get a candle safely, please. If you
we know what you guys are going to be doing after you've done listening to this. Okay, I've got a question for you. When you're in burnout, you often don't know that you're there.
Correct.
That's the issue. Until you've completely hit the wall and you're no good to yourself or anybody else. What does full blown out? What does burnout actually look like?
Yeah.
If you could practically unpack that for us.
So really good. Now, so if I said, let's make it personal.
Yeah.
So for me, we left New Zealand, we came to the States. I was studying, so I had no income for 3 years. And so I felt the pressure and the weight of that with my family, 4 children.
Of course,
When we arrived, 2, 4, 6 and 8 years old, there's school, they still eat. And as they grow, particularly the boy, they eat more. And so I was feeling the weight of it. Now, I took on more weight than I needed to, circle of influence, circle of concern. But the weight of that, over a period of time, we started what we're doing now. And as we grew, I'm worried about the money. Can I pay the bills? And also I had a bunch of beliefs and mindsets where I didn't know how to say no. So I would just take care of things, take care of everybody's things.
So they say yes to everybody, essentially. Yeah.
This is me.
Right.
So we got to a point where I was about to hop on a plane, go on another speaking engagement. And I lean over to say goodbye to my wife. And she goes, honey, I'm never going to leave you. And I love you. But you are dead emotionally. Now,
she packs a punch. That's a...
Yeah. In the kindest, most loving way. And apparently she'd been telling me that. And I think this is the thing that you're getting to is we don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And actually there's often people around you that are telling you there's feedback, but you're not listening because I'm so tunnel vision on accomplishing the task. And so I heard that. That was like
a wake-up call, right?
As I'm about to leave
You're
for 2 weeks. Yeah. And then I read a book that helped me get to some core of it. And then I read some ancient text, which for me is scripture. And those 3 things combined, and then being with a group of people, was actually in Krasnoyarsk, Siberia, is where I was going. At the end of the world from New Zealand and from the States. And with the group of people, and they all came from an addict background. A huge proportion of them, and seeing them alive, it was like something rejuvenated in me, and I realized, and then a third thing is a conversation with a friend of mine. And he was talking about confrontation and how I was avoiding confrontation. So that was my issue. And how I was believing some lies around that. Actually, every time I did that, I'm breaking off a piece of myself. So that's a whole nother topic.
I remember you saying that, actually. You said your words were, you kind of felt like you realized that you'd become a workhorse without realizing that you were. And you said the line here, which I found fascinating, was do more, do more, do more, but you'll never be able to do enough. And there was this realization, and they were like, if I'm not careful, I'm going to end up burnt out. I'm going to end up like that.
So grateful for my wife. So then I started to believe some lies, and so getting rid of the lies is like, well, love just says yes. Well, actually, love doesn't just say yes. Love also says no, because what good am I to somebody else if I'm dead emotionally? I'm not available to my family, those that are closest to me.
That's the thing. If you're thinking about we often worry about our staff underneath us and them burning out, but often if I just take a look at myself and myself as a leader, am I burnt out? And what am I projecting? Like, if I want to look after them, I got to learn to look after myself first, right? So important.
So what are some practical things to identify that?
Yeah, I think just when you're looking at people, can you tell that someone has burnout? It's kind of signals written all over them. Yeah,
and if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I'm not burnt out, well, just go to those that are closest to you.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's not the people that are distant. They don't know. They just think you're amazing.
They think you're incredible, doing a great job. Keep it up, which just fuels that thing, right?
So if you're dying, you're dying on the inside first, and slowly it starts to show up more and more on the outside until you have a physical breakdown, at which point it's obvious to everybody because you're no longer there. You're in hospital or somewhere else.
Or completely disconnected.
So here's some. Yeah. So how present are you with those closest to you? Are you aware of them? Do you actually hear them?
Yeah.
Can you sit still long enough, or are you constantly having to move?
And if I can interject for a second, this is really good, but this seems like it, because I think we all know what full blown out burnout looks like. You've hit the wall, you've crashed. But I think what Andy's talking about here is the indicators that lead up to the thing that you don't want to end up looking like.
Yeah.
So can I recognize those indicators before I get to a place of being completely numb and unaware?
Yeah.
So please keep going, because I know for me, when you did this with me, you know how doctors go through, beginning doctors go through their training and they come into contact with all the diseases ever known to man, and they're researching about them. And have you heard this before, where they just start diagnosing themselves and they're like, oh my gosh, I've got a cancer, or oh, I think I've got this disease or this malaria, because they're researching about it all the time. When I was talking with Andy and he was kind of breaking down what some of these indicators were like, oh my gosh, the week afterwards I saw some of these in my own life, actually, just symptoms of burnout indicators, which are just really great warning signs. Yeah. So please help us out. What are they? Good.
So number one is, how present are you with those especially with those closest to you? Yeah. Do you find yourself, can you actually engage and follow a thought, or do you just skip? And do not give me the excuse, oh, well, I'm ADD, or well, no. Actually, that's a cop-out.
Or I'm too busy.
Yeah.
Because that's
a cop-out.
Cultural norm, right?
Yeah. You have adopted that, and you're on a slippery slope to burnout. So how present are you?
Yeah.
Ask those closest to you. After you don't do this straight away, once you aware this yourself. So that's number one. Number two, or another one is, what's your measure of joy? When was the last time you laughed out loud? When was the last time you watched a movie and it moved you? So emotionally, joy is such an anchor of being alive, being a human being. We get to experience joy. So what's your measure of joy? Another one is, what's your measure of peace? Can you actually sit still for 5 minutes?
Yeah.
And just be present with yourself,
without feeling like you're going to do something. Yeah.
And your thoughts going a million miles an hour.
Yeah.
Actually, can you be still and actually even know yourself?
I usually this, or do you find your foot tapping? That was the problem.
Yeah.
Like, that's actually a really good indicator.
Tap. So there's another one. Another one is being restless. So that's the foot tapping. Something's going on, but even then I can't do that. I'm multitasking. I'm always multitasking. There's no time where I just put down the phone. I'm constantly on. I'm never turning off. I find it hard to sleep. There's a whole heap of things. Now, I'm not saying any one of these is it, but these are some indications for you to say, hey, pay attention.
Yeah.
When was the last time that you just spent time with friends? Without a transaction or a task that needed to be done? When was the last time that you just took a break for more than 24 hours?
Without feeling guilty about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So the feeling of guilt and never enough. So those are a bunch of indicators that would really help.
In the workplace specifically, if a colleague or an employee showed signs of this, what would it look like?
So all of those things would actually be the same.
Yeah, you mentioned a few that it was quite interesting. The gratitude, definitely, but I loved this because they were super practical. It was the starting to forget things. That really caught me, that list. Do you remember what you said?
Yeah.
It was starting to forget things. You start to forget the details. Yeah. Starting to miss appointments or dropping meetings with excuses as to why you can't be there. Having no spare capacity in your brain or your life. I'm like, really good. My gosh, that was a brilliant list and so helpful. You know, if you're an employee, you've got people underneath you and you're wanting to kind of catch those signs, because we want to look after our people. It's more sustainable than having them just suddenly skip off the radar and I don't know where they're at. It was a very, very helpful list.
Yeah. Now, and just to clarify, that is, and just remembering that as well is, that is so important, because when I'm more relaxed and I'm in rest or in flow, I tend to remember those things. But when I've got 10 things on my mind, then I don't retain them. And so it's like, oh, now that may be for a season. There's 2 weeks we've got to put in to get this over the hump, but then do you have a period where you rest? And if you don't, why not? But even yesterday, or this week, we've had an executive retreat. My wife was not well, so she asked me to get her 2 things from the supermarket. So as I'm preparing for the executive retreat, I go into the supermarket to get her these 2 things, and they're even down on a phone. But then I see, oh, candy. She likes candy, so I'm going to get her candy as well. We walk through the supermarket, and I get out of the supermarket in the car home to drop off, and realize one of those 2 things I haven't got, and it was written down on my phone.
That's funny.
What on earth happened? Oh, it's because I was not present with that task because I was thinking of all the other things. Now, there's whole things. So this happens in life, and we can clean it up. We can have an apology and take care of it. So being aware of that, don't beat yourself up over this. Like if you're listening to this and you're just like, oh man, don't stop it. Because that's part of the process is you're being too hard on yourself.
Also, I think within that, like we're mean to ourselves, we put pressure on ourselves because of expectations that we feel are given to us from other people. Sometimes they are real and sometimes they're not. So I tend to people please and, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get this thing done. I remember you were talking briefly about, can you say no to things? Or are you a yes man? You say yes to everything. Can you speak to, how can I communicate to my boss, to my superior, to my team lead, whoever, that it's too much? What does that look like in a way that do you know what I mean? It's like I want to be able to show that I can do the work, I'm capable, still pay me please, but I still need to be able to communicate boundaries in a way that's going to be received. Do you know what I mean? And
I think that we probably come back a step before we jump into that part. Is the question was, how do I, okay, I'm aware of it. What do I need to do to change?
What do I do now? Sorry, very good point.
And that's the story for me is, there's some other things that came up, but at the same time, I had the opportunity to run a marathon.
Yeah, I think that's crazy.
And it is crazy, but for me, I'm a runner, and I could have always done a half marathon. That's not a challenge for me, so I wanted to do something. And in the process of running a marathon and not burning out and not falling short, but I had a goal to finish strong. And so I realized there were 3 things in accomplishing a marathon for me. One is staying in my lane, as in run the pace that I need to run, because I'm no good to anybody if I don't. If the person next to me runs 2 hours and I'm 4 hours and I try and run their pace, I'm not going to last. That walking is okay.
Is it?
Huge. It's just a big deal. Walking is okay. And then finishing strong. So how do I finishing strong? And that was the goal. It's like, okay, I've got the end. I'm going to begin with the end in mind. The end is actually, I want to finish strong. I want to be present with the people around me. I want people in my latter years to say, Andy was present. My kids to say, Andy. So keeping the end in mind for you, what does that look like? What does finishing strong look like? That's number 1. Number 2 is, what's your lane? What do you do? Where are you most effective in your work and your role? Because if you're operating outside of that for an extended period of time, it's going to kill you, it's going to wear you out, and you're never going to be satisfied or fulfilled.
I remember you telling us a story about that with a couple that you worked with in an organisation, and they were completely burnt out, both of them. I think they had some family connection or something, and then it really just boiled down to they were in the wrong the wrong roles.
It's never going to work while they're in that role.
It was like a totally different company, right?
Take the lids off.
Fascinating.
And then the third one is walking okay. Is there's season, recognizing there's seasons. There's seasons of planting, seasons of sowing, seasons of harvesting, seasons of growing. There's seasons in life, and recognizing that if you are constantly in a particular season, then it's not going to work for you. There needs to be ups and downs and flows, and recognizing that, and recognizing the rhythms. And it's okay.
It is okay. You can't go 150% all the time. We're not designed to function that way. For a while. I think a lot of us live off our adrenals as well. So my husband's a nutritionist, and he talks about this. It's like you can live on adrenaline for a while, and you can do crazy amounts of work, but you can only do it in short bursts. And actually, your adrenaline is supposed to be there in a situation where you really need it, not every day in the workplace. So it's definitely not sustainable, which is what you were talking about. in staying out of burnout with the question, can you keep this pace going for the next 20 years? Right?
So then once I know that, okay, I've got to own me first. I can't put that on my boss. I can't put that on my manager. I've got to take responsibility for me.
And communicate that as well, right?
Yeah, this is what I need. And as a boss, as a leader of leaders, I know that any boss in their right mind, the cost to replace an employee is more than the cost to make sure that the employee is working well.
Really true.
So actually you being responsible for you and saying what you need in order to bring your best self to work and actually recognize and own that, then that's a key. And if you're the boss and you're listening to this, number one, you're doing it for yourself.
That's the thing.
And recognizing that everybody's different, and how do I create an environment that actually brings out the best, and the byproduct of that is you get much better work output over an extended period of time.
Yeah, that's really good. I love that. Another thing, just in the staying in your own lane, like we will talk about time management. This is just something I've kind of been learning, I guess, for myself a little bit this last week. We think about time management in terms of staying in your lane and things, and living kind of sustainably. But there's a real difference between, okay, I'm going to try and get just within my lane. I can do this. This is my priority. This is not. There's a difference between allocating time and allocating energy.
Yeah.
And I found that distinction really fascinating. It was such a flip. Like, instead of, this thing takes me 5 hours. No, this thing is going to take this much energy. And which is going to require most, and do that thing first. I'm like, that was such a great practical. I really loved that.
I love it.
And then on the flip side of that, which you were talking about in staying out of burnout, you're talking about leaves, water, and fire. It's like identifying the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual kind of elements. What are those 4 categories?
What are the practices?
What are the practical kind of things that actually bring back energy to you, that enable you to live sustainably and work sustainably?
That's it.
Brilliant. So we've kind of talked through what burnout really looks like. What are some indicators before you kind of hit that wall of being really numb to it, unaware of it, and suddenly everything's going haywire? We talked about that, okay, what to do next. What do you do if you realize, oh my gosh, this is me, which was definitely me this last week, and we've kind of got a couple of action steps. I think where I'd like to go now is, one question actually I have for you is, what is mine to own and what is theirs to own? In terms of what's mine to own as an employee, what's theirs to own as the boss, and how do I know the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone starts with you. You've got to work out what it is for you. Am I in the right lane, doing the right things?
Yeah.
Understanding there's seasons in a business as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in startup mode, usually you're going to be doing things that are beyond your immediately strength. Because that's just everyone
pitches in and does a million different roles.
And it's recognizing if you're in year 10 and you're still doing that, it's probably something's not right, and it's time to have a conversation and talk about where are you best, what's your strength. There's some really, really good resources.
I love that, because it's not you're doing everything wrong, boss. You're doing everything wrong, startup company. It's, hey, here's where I'm at.
Start with me. Take responsibility for yourself. Don't blame this on it. You're not a victim. You choose what you do and how you live.
Wow. Yeah.
And recognize, like you said, set up those practices for you. You'll be finding, I'm spending 12 hours of work a day at work, or who told you have to do that? It may not be your boss. It's you.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and that's where, don't blame this on somebody else. Like, start with you.
Yeah.
And then actually, that once you have, and I would say from an employee, do that first, and then don't immediately go to your manager. Actually set yourself up right, and then move towards this. Now, I'm assuming that you're not in burnout now, because if you are, you're actually going to be operating probably at 50% what your capacity is, and you're about to get fired.
Right. Yeah.
So really do the things to set up the practices that you need for yourself. If you got time for lunch, take the lunchtime. Now, so that's the you and understanding you part.
And on that, there's a couple of practicals. Getting more familiar with myself and kind of my limitations. You mentioned this about having wise kind of people, wise people in your life you can talk to. Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, wrinkles and body scars.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
So how do I know? Have people around you that might be a spouse, it might be a close friend, it could be a mentor, it could be someone in the company or outside the company. But what I look for in that kind of person is wrinkles, as in they're seasoned. They've got some
They've done some
seasoned
time.
life. Yeah, they've got some time experience. Now and then the second part is body scars. They've been through challenge, adversity, difficulty, opposition,
Yeah.
and they're still alive. And then the
Yeah.
qualifier is, say they got,
Yeah.
metaphorically, something happened and it stabbed them,
Mm.
as in they're wounded.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the qualifier is make sure that they don't still have the knife stuck in, and
I
it's
love that,
oozing septic offences, and they're miserable and complaining and gossiping, and that's not somebody that you want as a
Because
wise
it's not
counsellor.
necessarily going to apply to your
Yeah.
situation, so that's just.
So I want to see their scar.
Really
I want to
good.
know how they overcame that, and then that's someone that you can trust to speak into your life.
I love that. And then also, I mean, there's the very practical thing of so many actors are coming out with this at the moment, just journaling, just writing
Yeah.
stuff down to become more aware about where my limitations are, where my kind of boundaries, I guess, with work are, where my strengths are. Like some really good practicals there.
A couple of tools,
Go for it.
real
Yeah.
practical tools.
Yeah.
There's a book, Well-Being,
Okay.
around Gallup research.
Oh yeah.
And that's really, really good. And there's some actually assessments within that that'll help you.
Mm.
Another one is Strength Finder.
Yeah, I was about to say that one.
Now,
Yeah.
they may not be. I think they're associated with Gallup
Yeah.
research. Those two books will really help you.
Mm.
And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, my issue is confrontation, and I don't do confrontation," there's another good book, Crucial Conversations.
Ooh, I need to read that one.
Really practical, and it's got tools, and it's research based, and there's assessments. Those three little tools: Strength Finder, Well-Being, and what's the third one? Crucial Conversations. Those three would really help.
I love that. Okay. This is slightly similar, but it's interesting anyway, just from one of our clients. How do I decide whether there's something I push through or not push through?
Really good.
Right?
Yeah. Sometimes you don't know. So that's where wise counsel really helps.
Yeah. I wanted to reiterate that point because it's the same, but we often just forget.
Having that outside, and actually probably another real practical thing. Go for a walk. Go for a walk and actually ponder that thought, and get back, and then reassess it. Like, is this something to go through? So that's another real practical thing. So wise counsel, go for a walk, and then it's interesting. There's certain personalities and types where I think the context of Nicola is what we're talking to is people that tend to lean in. They're overachievers.
We really are. Yeah. We
So
actually
they
care about
kind of-
creating engaging learning experiences for our audiences, for our learners. So we go over and above to make sure that there's transferable learning that's happening. If I'm in leadership and development, I really want the best for my team. So we do tend to overexert.
Yeah. So that's the context for which I'm saying
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Your default is push through.
Right.
You
Because
never think.
of them.
Yeah. You never think.
Yeah.
Oh, perhaps somebody else could do this. Perhaps I could delegate. Perhaps.
Or nobody can do it as well as I can, so
Yeah.
I'll still keep
Yeah.
it on myself.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying is.
Yeah.
You're listening to this. You're listening to this podcast because you want to. This is the same reason.
Right.
You need to listen to this.
Yeah.
So it's probably
Yeah.
pause. Give yourself a break. Who set the time frame? You set the time frame. If you didn't, there's nothing stopping you going back to your boss and saying, "Can we have a conversation about the time frame? Because it's not working. I cannot get this done in time. Is it okay to renegotiate the parameters through which we've set this up?" And then you're going to be happier, more alive, more processed, and ready to do the one after it. So a friend of mine
Love
is a strength and conditioning coach for 1,500 special forces. Special forces. His job is to make sure that they go and they're deployed, they do their job, their task, which you and I never have to do,
No.
and that they get back so they can accomplish it both physically, but then they get back and they can recover as best as possible. And what he talks about is super compensation. If you do not have intentional rest, actually it deteriorates your performance. But if you will give yourself rest, it enhances it. Actually, your recovery, and you spring back at a higher level.
Wow.
It's like music. If you listen to music, there's literally a thing called rest. There's a rest.
Yeah.
And without that timing and a intentional rest, it accentuates and makes it more beautiful. So in your life, the performance of rest is critical.
That's really good. Actually, I had someone asking that thing, what strategies can I use to schedule planned rest and to build endurance instead of suffering from burnout? And I could speak to that a little, just backing off what you were saying. I think it's called the Pomodoro technique. And basically it's our brains kind of work in two different ways, diffuse mode and focus mode. We often use the focus mode to get all of our tasks and things done. And this is where kind of all the neurons in our brain are really, really close together. It's at the front of our brain, so we retain things. But we don't actually retain things as long. And the diffuse mode is when all the neurons are kind of like spaced out in our brain, which it basically is that relaxed kind of state. And so it allows information to kind of just, we can reflect, we're pondering, it's sticking in there a little longer, and we're more productive. And there was this famous artist, I can't remember his name, but he did these paintings or crazy clocks that were bent in funny ways. And he used to, no word of a lie, have a canvas, get stuck painting, and instead of trying to push at it, which we do, which he does, when we burn out, he would just go and sit on his chair, and he'd have keys in his hand, and when he'd get sleepy, the keys in his hand would do what? They'd drop. As soon as they dropped, what do you think he did?
Woke up.
He would wake up because he was in that half asleep stage, essentially diffuse mode, and then he'd he'd go to the canvas and he'd keep painting. It was like the block disappeared because he allowed himself to take the break. So
power nap.
Basically, yeah. So then they come up with a strategy, basically, which is like, you can apply this, if you're listening to this, apply this to your workplace. You think that you often have to keep going for 8 hours, and you think that we've got to get the project done. I mean, in reality, we're never going to get the project done. It has to be done incrementally, and I have to take a rest. You said this. I was like, if you're in that mentality of, I've got to get the project done from 1 all the way to 100, you'll just retire and die. I was like, thanks, Andy. That's a real wake-up call. Kiwis are very blunt and direct, and that was super helpful for me, actually, that notice. You've got to take rest along the way. So the technique is this. Do your work concentrated. Put a timer on it. I use my phone. 25 minutes, go for it. Get the task done up until 25 minutes. As soon as that thing goes off, stop for 5. Do something that brings you energy. Yeah. It might be go for a walk, might be look at flowers.
Push-ups, do push-ups, always works. Jump up and down the spot.
Not for me, you're the marathon runner, not me. But really, really helpful. Not for a really long time because we'll just get sleepy, but 5 minutes rest and then jump back into that 25. You'll be amazed how much more productive you are just because you've got that balance, right? So it's a really practical way of being able to avoid burnout. We are running out of time a little bit, but there's one more question. You ready for it? This is from a manager of, I think she has a lot of people underneath her, and her question is this. What advice do you have for leaders and managers who are dealing with high stress situations to avoid collateral damage to their team's stress levels?
Yeah.
That's a good,
that's a really good. So, I mean, and I'd start with number one, model it. Model it themselves. Recognize that if there's going to be a season, and I don't know, it could be a week, it could be a project, it could be... what is the time frame? What are the parameters? Test their parameters. Does it really need to be done in that time? If you're looking at this and thinking, oh my gosh, this project is going to burn out people, have you got enough people? Can you hire temp work? Can you outsource some work? So thinking creatively at that, but re-examine your own parameters and assumptions and actually model this yourself. And then intentionally, some of these practices that we've talked through, implement those with a team. Like if you're the leader, the power and impact of the leader going around just hand on a shoulder, if that's appropriate.
Very true.
Just checking in on your people. How you doing?
Encouraging.
Just those little words of encouragement. Making sure there's healthy snacks. Taking the team for a walk. Like if you know this bringing a treadmill or bouncy balls or something into the office that can help stimulate some of these activities, the fun, the joy. Provide meals, but make sure they're healthy. They're not loaded up with sugar and
it's going to be good for a bit and then crash you out. That's true.
Don't make it worse, which tends to be the case. But I love that. And then have the conversation with the team. Hey, here's what we've got. I'm aware that this is overwhelming. This is a lot of work in a short period of time.
So just the acknowledgement of, I see how much work you're doing. I see the stress. I'm working to do ABC. There's a level of transparency there that actually makes your team feel a lot safer. What if you're the leader and you're experiencing burnout or high stress?
Yourself. Well,
Yeah.
do this for yourself.
Right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Model
Yeah,
it.
Model it.
Do this for yourself. Model it.
So let them see you do it,
Yep.
and they see that, oh, I have permission to do the same, and oh,
Yep.
my leader is human as well,
Yep.
right? So good. We need to wrap up here. If you forget nothing else, don't forget Andy's 3 steps, the thing that he discovered when he was marathon running. What were they again, Andy?
Stay in your lane.
Yep.
So run your race, not someone else's race.
Yeah, so good.
Walking is okay, which
Yeah.
is all about self-care, understanding, and remembering the big picture, and finish strong, which is about begin with the end in mind. What are you doing this for? How are you going to finish? How do you make sure that my goal is not to get to 20 miles 3/4 of the way and then burn out, is to finish, complete the race that you started.
Yeah.
So those 3 things will really help.
I love that. One of the personal takeaways for me, definitely, there's so many, but the one that sticks out for me a lot is I'm not going to be able to get a project from A to B done in one short stretch. I need to make sure I take breaks intermittently between all of that, so I don't die on the hill of success. If you would like the opportunity to jump on an interview with the team at Nobi, similar to what I've just done with Andy Mason, you can reach out to hello@nobi.com and keep sharing your thoughts of community, keep reaching out to people and having those conversations. Let's keep learning from each other, and stay in your lane, slow is okay, and finish strong.
Thanks so much.